Hello, check 1, 2, and welcome to our webinar series on mastering Ftrack's API. We haven't seen many of you since our last series on project management earlier this year. While that was a more general rundown of the UI in Ftrack, this series is much more technical and for people on the developer side, but all are welcome. Thanks for joining us. This is session 1 out of 5 total, where we'll be providing a general intro on the API, setting it up, its documentation, and so on and so forth. I am Michael Sears. I'm an account manager for the Americas here at Backlight, and I've been with the Ftrack team for almost exactly 3 years, like next week. Joining me is Seth Gibson, who is Backlight's solutions delivery engineer. He's got an extensive background in game development, real-time 3D viz, XR, pipeline development over the course of many, many years, so you're in very good hands. He will be running the webinar. We expect it to last about 50 minutes. Please use the Q&A panel at any time throughout the presentation, and we'll try to respond in real time. But for longer answers, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the hour as well. So feel free to ask questions. If they're easy, we'll do them in real time. If it's slower, then we'll do them at the end of the session. And if we don't get to any, we will be sure to get answers out for any we don't have time to answer in this hour after the fact. And that's all I have to say. Let's go ahead and begin. Over to you, Seth.
Hey, thank you very much. Like Michael said, welcome. Glad everybody is here. And I'm Seth Gibson. Again, to recap, I'm one of the solutions engineers here at Backlight, and I focus mainly on Ftrack and Ftrack custom solutions. And I'm excited to present this series on the API. Now, let's level set a little bit for this first session. So this first session is going to be very basic. It's not going to be an intro to Python. It's not going to be an intro to development environments. What it's going to be is just some of the best practices that we use here for development. And we'll look at some of the resources that we think will be very useful for you. So if you're somebody who's already comfortable with Python development, you have a Python environment already set up, you're comfortable with things like virtual environments, using Git and GitHub, using pip and PyPy. We're not going to go over anything new here. So feel free to just grab the presentation and check out the links on your own. But otherwise, for you folks who are maybe a little newer to development, just kind of dipping your toes into it and are curious as to how we recommend you set up your environment and some of the resources that we think would be very helpful for you, please feel free to tag along. And as Michael said, ask questions in the chat, and we'll either address them at the end, or if it's quick and easy, we'll go ahead and throw it out. So, okay. So really quickly, this is an overview of the whole course. We're in section 1, so I think I just described what we'll be doing there. So from there, we'll go into actually working with the Ftrack API, and we'll build up in every session. So the first session session number 2 will just be a quick overview of how to start really getting into the API, how to work with the kind of the core objects in the API, how to do very simple queries against your Ftrack projects and your Ftrack entities. From there, we'll go into building more complete solutions. So building what we call custom triggers, custom actions, both of which are user-defined tools that you can use to sort of automate your workflow. Then we'll go into our location system, which talks about how Ftrack stores files and how you can customize that. And then last, in advanced topics, we'll look at how to extend Ftrack and how to integrate it with other DCC applications. So, if you're a Maya user, if you're a Unity user, if, whatever package you use, Ftrack can probably be made to interact with that. So we'll go over that a little bit. So we went over who we are. Again, Michael, Seth, I don't need to recap that. And yeah, let's dive right in. So what we'll look at is 3 topics: setup, documentation, and resources. And again, setup is not going to be super extensive. We'll just take a look at what it is that we use here. We'll give you some other recommendations, and we'll touch on some of the specifics of how we work with those. Documentation, we'll point you at where you can find everything from general help to specific API topics. And then in resources, we'll look at things like Ftrack recipes, sample code. We'll look at some of the repositories we have on our GitHub that might be useful. And again, please feel free to ask any questions or comments, and yeah, we'll address those if so. First of all, our coding environment. We like to, one of the neat things about the Ftrack API is it's pretty vanilla Python. So you don't, there's nothing really special you need to do. There's no specific IDE or any plugins that you really need besides the basics. So for Python, we recommend that you're in 3.10 or 3.11. The minimum version you'll want to use is Python 3.8. And we also recommend that you set up a virtual environment. For those of you who are not familiar with what a virtual environment is, it's basically just a sandboxed version of a Python install. So, you can have your system, your global Python install that, on a Windows machine might live under your program files directory. But then you can also create a very, like I said, sandbox version that lives pretty much wherever you want it to. And that environment is completely separate from your global. So one of the benefits of that is you can install different libraries, different modules, different functionality into that won't affect your global setup, and you can pretty much go hog wild in there. So if you're using it for testing, if you're using it for development, and you do something that maybe you didn't want to do, you get an undesirable result, you can simply delete that environment and start over again, and it won't affect your global install. It won't affect any of your source code files, your project files. Really, you can just rebuild that from scratch. And the link here will actually show you how to do that. And we'll take a look at what that looks like in Visual Studio real quick. Lastly, as I mentioned, the Ftrack and our APIs are very vanilla Python. So that means they're hosted on PyPy. For you folks who are not familiar with that, that is the Python package index, which is a pretty official repository of a lot of Python modules, which means that you can install the Ftrack API from using built-in Python tools like pips, so the Python package installer. And again, this link will take you to the specific command line and different methods that you can use to set that up. So we use Git for all of our code versioning. Again, this is not going to be an extensive Git tutorial, but you can get Git from gitscm.com. And again, these links will take you to all of those. We host all of our code on GitHub, which for you folks who are not familiar with it, is pretty much the central home of Git repositories on internet. You can feel free to use that to share. You can use it to host your own projects. And again, we use that for a lot of our repositories. All of our public repositories are there. So if you want to grab our recipes repository, if you want to grab any of the repositories for say our integrations, or any other functionality that or packages or code that we provide for you to freely use and peruse and edit and customize, that'll all be on GitHub. One of the tools that, if you're not a GitHub power user or a Git power user, we like to recommend is GitHub Desktop. And what GitHub Desktop is it's just a desktop application, a GUI application that is actually integrated with the GitHub website. So if we take a look at let's see. So if we take a look at that, we can go. So if we take a look at GitHub, if I pop open a repository, let's see, how about this one? So our Ftrack recipes on GitHub, I can say open with GitHub Desktop. And what that will do is take me to this application here. And from here, I can pull the repository. I can do all the simple, I guess, GitHub day-to-day operations, and even more complex operations. So if you're somebody who needs to do things like branching and merging and and any other sort of day-to-day Git operation. You don't want to jump into the command line. We recommend GitHub Desktop. It's very simple. It's very straightforward. And for you folks who are new to Git and GitHub, it's actually a great training tool too. So back to it. Okay. For code editing, again, we don't need to do anything special as far as IDE. We like to use VS Code. We also like to use PyCharm. I personally mainly use VS Code. VS Code is a free, we'll say, somewhat stripped down version of Microsoft's popular Visual Studio suite, but it is a very full featured, and there's nothing there that's keeping you from doing complete Python development. So really quick, we could take a look at that. And we'll go over some of the functionality we like to use, especially for you folks who might have a cursory familiarity with GitHub Desktop, or sorry, not GitHub Desktop, Visual Studio Code. We just went over GitHub Desktop. Oh. See if I can share my screen. Okay, well, I apologize. It looks like, yeah, it looks like Livestorm doesn't want me to share. Oh, wait, there we go. So this is Visual Studio Code, and I'm actually at the extension page, and that's one of the neat things about VS Code is that you can customize it for different languages. So for Python, there's a couple plugins we like to use, or extensions, I guess, to use the proper terminology. Obviously, the base Python extension, which provides you language support to Visual Studio Code. PyLance, which provides some additional language features that we won't go into. And of course, the debugger is also very useful. Be careful. You will see a Python for VS Code extension. This has been deprecated, so avoid that. And with just those three extensions, PyLance, Python, and Python debugger, you should be good to go in VS Code. And again, there's nothing beyond this that you need to use the Ftrack API. Again, want to continue to reiterate that the Ftrack API and Ftrack Python is very, very standard. So there are no gotchas, no caveats, no special plugins or functionality you need to use with this other than our specific Ftrack API modules. So back to it. Farm is another one, but that one's much more fully featured than VS Code. So out of the box, that comes with everything. So if for some reason VS Code isn't working for you, we recommend using PyCharm, and that's something that if you're curious as to how to get up and running with that, you're always free to post either in the user Slack or in the forum, and somebody can help you get up and running with that. Okay, so now that we have an idea of where we want to go as far as how to set our development environment up, how do we actually learn to use the API? Where do we go for source code, for examples, for API documentation, for any information that's going to help you get going? So we have quite an extensive set of resources. And the first place we'll point you to is our Ftrack help, which is, let's see, which is this site right here, help@ftrackstudio.backlight.co. And one of the things, one of the caveats we have to throw out is that we've been kind of trying to sort of coalesce all of our documentation, put it into a couple different known spots. So if you Google Ftrack help, you might find a couple different links. But the one that we're sending you in this documentation that I'm showing you here now is really the one that you want to go to, because this is the one that is official. This is the one we're updating. This is the one where all the current and new stuff is going to appear. So getting into specifics, Again, so this is our new API developer hub, and this is something that came online, I believe, earlier this year. Again, if you Google for Ftrack Python API, you might find a bunch of different resources, but the one you want to go to is anything that's hosted on developer.ftrack.com. Again, this is where all the new stuff is going to be. This is where we're updating. This is where, anytime we have either new Python features, new API features, or even new functionalities such as our webhooks, which came online earlier as well, it's all going to be here. So if you Google for something and you can't find it, or you go to a page that doesn't have the information that you're looking for, make sure that it is hosted on developer.ftrack.com. And if there's something missing, again, feel free to drop us a line in the forums. Feel free to send us a support note, and we'll see about getting that updated. And speaking of forums, and again, all these links are in the document, the presentation we'll be sending you. So this is our forum site, forum.ftrack.com. Pretty straightforward, nothing you've probably never seen here. The neat thing about this is that it is monitored by Ftrack or Backlight staff. So if you post a question, a good chance that either one of the product engineers, somebody from marketing, depending on the question, or one of the solutions engineers like myself will actually help you out with that. So this is a great place to come and get general quick help that may not quite merit a support ticket, but there's something you're curious about. And then a couple more specific documents. We do have our Ftrack changelog. This is the changelog for Ftrack Studio. So if you're curious as to what's gone into the last version, or what's in an earlier version that might be useful to you, you can always come here, and this is hosted under our help. And then of course we do have release notes for our APIs as well. So again, all useful stuff. It's all in the links, and we recommend that you familiarize yourself with this, because especially as you're getting up and running, most of your questions are probably going to be answered here. Okay, So let's go into some specific resources, things like our Ftrack GitHub, our Ftrack recipes, and like I mentioned earlier, a couple specific repositories that might be useful for you folks who are really looking to start extending Ftrack and kind of really like make it your own. So we mentioned GitHub. We do have our own GitHub, and that is github.com ftrackhq. So this is where pretty much everything that we're updating lives. For example, our Ftrack recipes. This is one of the we talked about this a little earlier, but to get a little more specific, this is going to be your first stop and probably best bet for not just code samples, but also if there's a specific function or custom workflow, custom action or event that you're trying to build. These recipes actually are kind of designed to let you do that. So, for example, we have one of our more popular ones is called Cascade Status Changes. And basically, what that lets you do is you can change the status on say a task or an asset or in any status driven entity, and that will actually automatically set the status for anything that's related to that. This one's very simple, but again, if there's something like that some automation that you're looking to customize, this can actually be used to kind of give you a leg up on production. And that's really the goal of all of our recipes, is to give you something that's not just a demo or a sample, but something that you could say, okay, I'm going to start from here and extend this into my own custom solution. Let's see. We do have a couple other things we recommend. A lot of these searches, this is just a very simple GitHub Ftrack search, and some of these repositories are also very useful. And in some cases, for example, this Ion Ftrack is written by some folks that we work with fairly closely. A lot of these we don't really support, but again, if there is something that maybe is not provided by our recipes or one of our repos, we absolutely recommend that you just run this search, and somebody may have addressed your concern already. And again, we can't support a lot of these directly, but it's something you could go to the forum, you could go to the user Slack, and chances are somebody else has probably taken a look at this, and maybe even the developer of some of these is also on the forums or in the Slack and would be willing to help you out with that. And then lastly, if there's a specific module, again, we mentioned PyPy, the Python package index. Again, everything that we release that's Ftrack Python is here. So our Python API, some specific libraries and modules for developing your own actions and triggers, as well as some specific, we'll say, libraries that we might have customized, such as Qt, that you want to use to write your own custom web widgets or UIs. That's all here. And if you're, once you get familiar with pip, if you're not already, it's very easy to just run a pip install command against any of these, and that will get installed directly into your virtual environment. Very, very, very quick and easy. Like I said, no extra downloads, nothing, no extra steps. You just pip install, and you'll have access to that functionality. So, and that's it. Like I mentioned, this one is pretty quick. This is just kind of a welcome to the Ftrack API environment. So if there are questions, we can jump to those right now.
Questions tab at the bottom right if anybody wants to ask anything in particular, which is fine. Go ahead and throw stuff in there now. And then we also have sent over a link to the slides here. As we mentioned, there's a lot of links in there that people will need to use. And I'm going to go ahead or actually, we don't have chat enabled, but we'll be able to share these slides after the fact. And then we will also share a couple links. And we can give it just a minute for questions if anybody wants to throw something at us real quick in this intro session. All right, I don't see anything coming through, but thanks, Seth, for, hey, here we go. All right. David Ridges actually asks, is everything on GitHub monitored and safe to use? Not sure if it is only Ftrack that can provide codes to use. And I have that question up there right now, Seth.
Safe, if you mean tested and vetted internally. So anything that's on our repo, Ftrack HQ, yeah, that does come just from our development team and from our solutions delivery team, and it does go through a bunch of different processes to make sure that like, yeah, there's no safety concerns, or there should be no concerns. You be able to walk the beginners through what it looks like to add one of those? Sure, yeah, that's a great question. Let's see, stop sharing real quick. So let me share my Visual Studio, my VS Code window, and real quick I can show you what that looks like. Which is that? Here we go. So actually, since I don't have recipes on this, I can show you the whole process. So I'm going to go to GitHub Desktop real quick and grab that. GitHub real quick and grab that. Yeah, essentially all you're doing is you can, if you're in your code editor, so for testing and development, what you can do is you can actually just run, because they're all just Python scripts, and so you can actually just run the Python code from your editor. And one of the things you do when you create an action for Ftrack is that you pass it in some server credentials so that it knows how to, what to connect to. And then once you run that code in VS Code, that'll trigger the server to say, hey, recognize this plugin, this action, whether it's an action or event, and then that'll just show up in your window. So again, let me just pull this onto my machine real quick. Something else I can show you guys real quick. Show you some basic code. Open my folders real quick. So, so if I go into, say, the actions for this, let's see, actually, let's look at the event. So we'll get cascade status changes. So if I open up this Python file, really all I have to do is just play it, and then that'll show up, and and then like I said, when I go over to my Ftrack instance, so whatever your Ftrack instance is, it'll show up either as an action, if it's an action, or if it's an event. You know, as soon as you do whatever interaction the web UI triggers triggers that, then you should just see the results of it. So it's actually pretty simple. And then when you're wanting to install it for global use, there's a couple ways you can do that. You can run that through Ftrack Connect, or you can, which we'll go into in one of the later sessions, or there's an environment variable you can set that you can point at a folder for all your plugins, and then the server will just register those on startup, and as well when you're working with the API and you create sessions. So yeah, so installing, any custom actions or events is really just as simple as taking the code and dropping it into a folder and making sure that you have either set the environment variable so your server recognizes it, or so that we're putting in a spot where our Connect application can bootstrap it for you.
All right. Thanks a lot, Shauna.
And we'll actually look at that process more in detail in the later sessions, where we actually start getting into the editor and we actually start running code and looking at results. So I'd recommend coming back to especially the next two sessions. I think session 3 is the one where we really dive into actions and events, and we'll actually be using some of the recipes for that. So.
All right. Cheers, David. Cheers, Shauna. Like Seth said, as a reminder, this is a series of training webinars. The next one is in 1 week at this same time, noon Eastern, on the 21st of November. Also, like to remind everyone that we have a bi-weekly Ftrack advice clinic that is also hosted live by our team. We cover more general UI questions there, but feel free to jump in for more straight up ftrackapp.com questions. And next week's session is advanced interaction and querying from the whole team. We appreciate you spending time with us and hope you all took something away during this. Look forward to seeing you on the next session. Thanks for everybody attending, and have a great day.